Hey everybody, this is Mike Van Meter. Welcome to the Recovery is Possible show. And today I am meeting with a good friend of mine, Ray Houk. And you know, what's interesting is I've known Ray for quite a few years actually. And a lot of you know that I teach spin classes is sort of a hobby. And we met, he was a student in my spin class for several years before I even knew that he was a Navy chaplain, but he is, and he's going to talk about that experience today. And he's going to be talking about his experiences in the addiction field because he has a lot of experience there and working in the VA and some other areas, and his wife is a counselor as well. And we're going to be talking about spirituality and religion and how that relates to recovery, because I tell you what, that's a big question. That's usually at the top of the list when I work with a patient now, is this idea of, are you telling me I'm going to have to believe in God? I'm not going to believe in God. I've got problems with the church. I'm angry at the church. I'm angry at God. You name it. We hear it all. And that becomes a barrier for people when we look at recovery. And Ray and I are going to be breaking that down here today and talking about what are we really talking about, and why is it important to have developed a spiritual program that you can work with in order for you to get into long-term recovery? Because after all, that's hopefully the goal. If you're someone that's listening to this program right now, that either you or someone you know may need to get into long-term recovery. And what you're going to find, and I've often said this, is that people, like if you look at the recovery population, the people that continue to relapse or never get well tend to do certain things. But the people that get well also tend to do certain things. And having a spiritual program tends to be one of those many things that they do. But what does that mean? What does it mean for you? And how can we get through this whole subject without getting angry, getting sad, becoming defensive? I don't know. For some reason, this is a hot topic and a hot button issue with people, and we're going to discuss that. But first, I want to introduce you to Ray, and he's going to tell you a little bit about his background, and then we'll get into it from there. So, Ray, welcome to the show.
Yeah, delighted to be here with you. I'm Ray Houk. I just retired from the Navy after 41 years of service, both enlisted as an enlisted Marine and then later on as a chaplain, and delighted to be with you. Part of my training, and about 10 years of it, has been in Navy medicine, both formally and informally, serving Navy and Marine Corps, as well as working with wounded warriors. And part of that is recovery, because we all know that part of taking the pain away from some of the things that people go through is people have a tendency to use substances and then get hooked and then abuse them. Of course, that can go all the way. There's a myriad of reasons why people do that. But setting those reasons aside, people want to get better. I really believe that people want to be a better version of themselves now than when they were using. So for those of your listeners who may be struggling with it, as recovery is possible, as the name of this podcast is, spirituality and the religious practices, particularly the disciplines of spiritual disciplines, the disciplines that come from various types of religious practices, have a lot of societal norms, which we can talk about. But having that community of faith that's so supportive, that understands, that really attends to where you're at in recovery process, can be a great tool for you. So I worked for 6 months at the Veterans Administration when I was going through a clinical pastoral education assigned to Portsmouth Naval Medical Center. And then I also worked in the substance abuse rehab program at Portsmouth and in their outpatient program, but all the way through my bumps and bruises through the military and the opportunities I've had to work with Navy and Marines, both deployed and home port. Substance abuse was always a looming issue in the background. It's something I always confronted, always asked about, and then spouses also of military service members, men, both male and women, female spouses, certainly confronted those issues as addiction is a family problem.
Yeah, it really is. And even as a minister now, addiction, let me ask you this, because I ask people this all the time when I go out and I speak in public, and I kind of discovered this by accident. It's not something that I consciously thought about, but when I go before groups, I'll be speaking to a group tonight, and I will start off by asking how many people in the room know of someone in their life that has an addiction issue. And do you know that I've never met anyone that doesn't know someone with an addiction issue? Not one. Not one. Did you find that in the military?
Oh, yes. A lot of people join the military to do something positive, to make some positive changes, to maybe change their people, places, and things, to really get some knowledge, skills, and abilities in their life. And then also, sometimes they join to run away from something that's been harmful, a childhood experience, perhaps an abusive situation in one form or another. But they carry those isms, if you would, with them into their new life. And if they're not confronted, changing people, places, and things won't help if they don't, at the root of themselves, want to change. And a lot of times people want to change, but they don't know how. And they're not willing to really just submit to the process of change, that faith, that transformation, that accountability can bring to someone's life. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it really does. And I really like what you just said there, that they will not submit themselves to the process of change. You know, I know now in the work that I do, and I work at a major hospital, and I've had patients come through our unit that have been to detox 50 times. Not uncommon to have somebody 20 plus times go through it. They can quote the big book to you. They can, when I do the physiological lectures on addiction, some of them could actually get up and teach the class that I'm teaching.
I believe it.
But yet they keep coming back and back and back. And my only conclusion to that is you know what to do, right? There's a difference between knowing what to do and doing it. And that goes back to what you're talking about. That is submitting yourself to the process. And that starts with having made a decision to do that. You either, you know, and you and I were talking before we came on the program here, and that is that, you know, I don't think that they understand that you either deal with addiction or it's going to deal with you. But however way you want to do it, you're going to have to confront the issue.
Oh, yeah.
One way or the other. But our goal is to get them to confront that issue earlier. But there's a stubbornness that people have. And maybe it's the ego, maybe it's self-centeredness. You know, you have extensive experience in this, not just with addiction, but even just in pastoral care and whatnot. I mean, what are you seeing with people from your perspective? And I have my theories, but I want to get your thoughts on this. So what's your perspective on what's going on there? What is it about somebody that would bring them to detox 50 times, but yet not follow the instructions for aftercare in order to do what they need to do to get well?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, we have to understand that substances dull pain. It works. So you're either ending up with somebody, you know, you've got one of three choices when you bump up against something and you're in pain. Is one, you go to the ER and hope you find somebody who has some compassion on you and will get you to the right person who can really be of some accountability and some help, and you can start to get in a program. Or two, you know, you spend $10 and get a pill, or you spend $10 and get another bottle, and that pain can go away rather quickly and easily. The problem is you're only offsetting the invitability of that pain coming back. You're really not solving anything. Mm-hmm. And so to your question specifically, I think it's that innate principle of pride of, I don't want to lose control of myself. But it's a lie, because alcohol, drugs, substances, they make you lose control of yourself. I mean, don't look at YouTube, but, you know, look at various social media about all the funny things that people do when they're under the influence of substances. So who rules your life? If you're willfully giving your control of your life over to a substance, you're going to do certain things. If you're willfully giving control of your life to a higher benevolent power, then you're going to have a different type of life.
Mm-hmm. And oftentimes, you know, people will come in to the treatment center and they'll say, I can't believe in a God. Can't believe in a God. And what I tell, and if you're listening to this and you're struggling right now, and I'm talking to you, and you're saying, yep, I can't believe in a God. I can't believe in that quote unquote higher power. What I'm going to say to you is that I'm going to call you out on that, and I'm going to tell you that you don't have a problem with following a higher power. And I'll explain what I mean by that. If you think about it, if you're somebody, I'll just take drinking, for example. You have no problem in following that God, that power. Because if you're honest, if you got to the point where you're listening to this program because you feel like you need to listen to this program, your bottle, your drinking tells you where to go, when to go, who to go with, whether you're going to go at all. Check out where, making sure that you're prepared when you get to where you go, that you can drink. If you think about all these different things, it tells you exactly what to do and when to do it and who to do it with. That's a God. And you've worshipped at it for years, and you are a faithful and obedient servant to your God. All we are saying in recovery is maybe you need to replace that God with something else. Now, if it bothers you to use the term God, do whatever you want to do. But the experience that we have is that you have to have something in your life that is greater than you. And maybe look at this as being baby steps, but maybe it's a purpose. Maybe it's being part of an organization. Maybe it's service to others, which is the classic AA way and NA way of dealing with things. And that is a being of service to other people and helping the next person who is suffering. Because we know that as long as I'm trying to help the next person, I tend not to be up in my own head and think about the things that are going on with me. Now, in time, what people find is that their idea of spirituality grows from there. It may not be a transformation overnight and immediately. It can be, people have that. But for a lot of people, it's sort of like just getting through that initial physiological pull of the drink and drugs, and sort of almost like a slow awakening of your own existence and your own purpose and your own spirituality.
Well, we all know that people stop developing emotionally, spiritually, intellectually when they start using a substance.
Yeah.
So they just stop, whether they're 12 years old or 15 years old or 17 or 27, they just stop developing. And that is true with their spirituality as well as their intellect and their emotions and their willpower. So it's really important. So I just want to give you a working definition. This comes from, there are many definitions of spirituality, but this is a good working definition of spirituality, which comes from Lisa Miller, who's a professor of psychology and education and the director of the clinical psychology program at Teachers College in Columbia University. And I'm reading the book, The Spiritual Child, The New Science of Parenting for Health and Lifelong Thriving. And she does, it is concerned about lifelong thriving because she does talk about young adults and the development of spirituality. So she defines spirituality, and this is on page 25 of this particular edition that I'm looking at. Spirituality is an inner sense or relationship to a higher power that is loving and guiding. And those last two words are really important, loving and guiding, because we all know that there's, and it's been argued, there are harmful religions out there that really control people, that pull people away from relationships with others. And that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about a loving and guiding daily presence that people can tap into. For me, that's my relationship with Jesus Christ and my church group, which is supportive of who I am and who I'm becoming. But they're interested in the spiritual journey of that. And the important point is that spirituality encompasses our relationship and dialogue with this higher presence, however you define that. And I think that's really important because it's a general working of spirituality. And a lot of times the classic spiritual disciplines of ancient religions of various types have built into their structures patterns of worship, patterns of getting together, patterns of prayer that can really help people, especially younger people, develop that sense of the divine in their life that is guiding and loving and that is not abusive and does not really take from people, but gives people, infuses their hearts with that type of spirituality, because you can miss God by 18 inches. I mean, by that I mean the distance between your head and your heart, because people have a tendency, especially in our culture today, to intellectualize religion and faith and point out all the strategic bad things that religion has done through the centuries. And I don't argue with any of those bad things, because people are sinful and people can be involved in religious practices that are harmful. So setting that aside, overall, I think religious faith can provide community, can provide support, can provide guidelines, such as don't lie, from which we get our When you go buy something from the store, if it's not what you think it should be, you can return it. All those business practices that are based upon truth and justice and the confidence that we have in one another. And those one another's are found all through Christian scripture, but are also supported in other faith groups as well. And a lot of the growing part of movements are the nuns. I don't believe in any religion. I believe in sort of a God out there somewhere. Okay, that's fine. Because even if you don't believe in a God concept, that doesn't mean that it's not there. And it doesn't mean that God, however you define that, doesn't believe in you. And so in the recovery process, faith can be really crucial to saying, I can change. God does believe in me. God does care about me. There is a benevolent force in the universe, which, I believe personally is the God concept, to move to that next level. And so when you're alone in the dark of the night, making these decisions about what you're going to do or what you're not going to do, then you've got some resource there that is spiritual, that is deep, that you can develop, that you can tack on to.
Yeah, and I think that's important. And I'll just share with you a story that I talked about a long time ago, and I was thinking about it recently, that, it's important, this benevolent God, omnipotent presence. It's important to understand, because I remember I was probably about 6 years into recovery around that point. And where I was working, we went overseas, and we were doing some training with the Polish police, and actually some agencies, different European agencies, but we were in Poland. And I remember being in Warsaw, Poland, and there was more alcohol probably than water anywhere. And the group that I was traveling with, of course, that was not uncommon where I worked, a lot of alcohol when you're on the road. And the people were saying, hey, come on down, let's go out, let's do this, let's do that. And so here I am, that addicted part of your brain says, well, I'm in Europe, Eastern Europe, nobody will know. I can just drink while I'm here, and I'll go back home, and who would know the difference? And there were a few things, Ray, that hit me and kept me from drinking. And one was this, and that was sort of that, remember, addiction is isolation and recovery is community. And by this point, 6 years in, I had started, I founded an AA meeting at the church that I go to. It's not affiliated with the church, it just happens to be in the church. But I'm there, and those people kind of look at me a certain way. They look at me as almost like the leader of the group, even though there are no leaders in AA. But I founded the meeting, so people they kind of look to me, right, for some guidance when it comes to recovery. Newer people in recovery are kind of looking to me as that example. And I'm sponsoring other men, right? So they definitely look at me as someone that is sort of their mentor, so to speak. And I knew that I was coming up that summer in I think that was going to be the 7th year. So I'd pick up that 7-year chip. And it hit me that when I was there, that I was confronted with sort of a moral dilemma. I really wanted to drink, but I would have to go back to the United States and face these people and look them in the eye and say, hey, thank you for giving me this 7-year chip, knowing that I drank when I was in Europe. But more importantly, to go to your point, there was one other thing, because when I thought to myself, who would know? Who would know that I drank over here? And it hit me that God would know. And I had suffered so much pain leading into recovery that I began to fear what would happen if I started drinking again. Because it was almost like I was saying, thinking to myself, because I do believe that there was a divine power that brought me into recovery. And it was if that didn't hurt, if that wasn't painful enough, watch out now. If you want to suffer pain, this will be pain. And the fear of what those consequences would be of me drinking outweighed the desire to drink. And the good news is I didn't drink and came back to the States unscathed. But that idea of having commitment and responsibilities to other human beings, and then being concerned about my higher power, how the consequences of that outweighed that desire to drink, and I made it through. And I'm at 11 years now, so or close to 11 years. So it bought me, but that was almost that was.
You mean it's not all about you?
Huh?
You mean it's not all about you?
No. Well, that's what you learn in recovery.
Exactly.
But in addiction, though, it is about us. In recovery, it becomes about others because
Yes.
I really felt responsible. In a way, I felt an obligation and a duty to the men that I was sponsoring and the people in that meeting to carry through. Because who am I to come back to the United States and talk to you about how you can work your program of recovery when I'm not doing those things? That changes how you think, I think.
Yeah, and you know, I don't know about where you work now or your experience, but in my experience working at that facility I was working at for 6 months, you know, I was doing spiritual evaluations on patients, and it happened to be in the VA system, but it really could be any system at all. And those patients who were successful had some type of background from their childhood that they could lean on, some type of prayer system, some type of program in spiritual development that they could restart or rekindle or adjust in some way. Because, I mean, some of us start off in one path and, you know, can adjust to another, but still keep making progress in the development of our hearts and minds. And I think, and so I had a senior chaplain pull me aside and we were talking about this phenomenon, and he goes, well, you know, a lot of and it happened to be mostly men going through the program down where we were, said basically, you know, they're just coming in here for 28 days and they're going to leave here. You'll notice when it's cold out, they'll check in, and then they'll stay here for 28 days because it's free. And it should be free. I think our government does a good job with that as far as taking better care of our veterans, but that's a whole different subject. And the sense of they're going to hit the street and they're going to go out because they've been clean for a while. They're going to get a cheaper high. Now that's cynicism, but it's true. And so I think to your point earlier of the difference between somebody who really wants to make a radical, and by that time I'm using the word radical in its mathematical sense of to the root change, can change direction. You know, when you start off on a course and you're on a ship or you're flying to a destination, you know, if you're just a half a degree off at the beginning of that, you're going to end up in some other place by the time you finish your long journey. And I think to come back to the root and to adjust that just a little bit and to say, you know, I'm willing to consider my faith. I'm willing to consider religion as part of my recovery process. I'm willing to consider that, to make that step, could adjust that course enough to make a difference in your life and actually save your life and save the life of your family. Because you're right, it's not all about you. And so many times down there, I would talk to people and they're disconnected. Their family won't return their phone calls. They've stolen every penny they could get their hand on from everybody who they know, and they're totally frozen out of all those relationships that could be supportive and helpful to their recovery process, and they're so alone. They're so alone and so desperate. And so the Lord is that one who could really be there for them at that time. Just consider that change.
Yeah, I really like that. The small changes in the beginning. And for most people, recovery starts with small changes. There are those people that have that bright light moment and they go to their first meeting or they go to their first counseling session or they go to the treatment for the first time and they got it. It was magical. There are those people. They are not the majority by any stretch of the imagination. For many people, and I think that was true of me, it was really just sort of small changes. It was the incremental changes.
Yeah, and sometimes it's you fall backwards, but you just got to. Honesty is a practice. Mm-hmm. Being honest with yourself, being honest with those who are around you. So, and that truth, the truth will set you free, right? Mm-hmm. It's in the FBI or the CIA building, but the truth will set you free. But it's in Scripture also. And sometimes we do take, 1 or 2, 3 steps forward, and then we slip back. And then we say, okay, recalibrate, get back in the program. No shame, no guilt, just start again. And you may not have to go all the way back to zero, but you may have to go back a couple steps and to make some more progress and to clean up the pathway, if you would.
Yeah, and that's a good point, too.
And you got to work the program.
There are people that come into treatment, and we hear this. In fact, I hear this all the time because it's where I work at. I'm in a detox center, so it's not uncommon for somebody to come in, and they're with us usually 5 to 7 days with us. Then they get released. And I have literally... so I work 4 days on and I'm off 3 days. And it's not uncommon for me to see a patient up through that last, that fourth day. And then I'll come in the next week and I'll be, oh, you're still here. They're like, no, I've left and I've come back. I mean, they've come back that quickly. And what I hear right off the bat is, oh, Mike, I screwed up. And I always tell them, no, you didn't screw up because you're back here. Yeah. You're back here.
Yeah.
And maybe address that a little bit because you talked about moving forward and moving back. Folks, and if you're listening to us and you are trying to get into recovery, it really isn't about how many times you try as long as you're still in the fight. It's when you give up. That's the problem. Now, we are going to try to work on getting the message to you. Don't get me wrong. But you know what? Even that person that's been to treatment 50 times, you know what? You're still coming back.
Yeah.
There's always hope.
I worked at a church in Los Angeles for a number of years, going through college and seminary and youth pastor and clean the toilets and you just do whatever you need to do. But it's really developing a servant's heart to humility. But I remember one particular time we had this gentleman come in and he was in a recovery program. He had just started. His life was starting to go a bit better. He was involved in church and starting to connect with people. And he had, I'm not sure if he was formally married, but it was his other half, if you would, was sadly killed in a car accident. It was sudden. It was bad. And he had just given his life to Christ and just made a commitment and was living out his recovery program using these tools. And he came in and the senior pastor wasn't there. So here I am, like 22-year-old youth pastor, didn't know too much. And he starts yelling at me, like just walked in the church office and was really angry. And why would God do this? And God let me down and God isn't real and all this stuff. And I looked at him and it must have been some type of shock of inspiration or something, but it wasn't me. And I said, you're here. You're here in this church office talking to me and yelling at God, which is probably a pretty healthy thing to do at this point. I'd probably be doing the same thing. I didn't use all these words with him, but I let him go for a while. And I said, I can't tell you how much it means to me that you came here instead of crawled back into a bottle again. You're here. And we were able to support him and help him and cry with him. And it made a huge difference in his life. Yeah. And I lost touch with him after a couple years, but for that season of life, we were there for him. Because the church can be, it's not for everybody, and there's a lot of different religions and churches out there, but the church can be very, very supportive of people's recovery programs and people's lives as they go through these as resiliency. But you brought up resiliency and keeping trying. And he hung in there and we were able to work with him through that and all that. So all that to say is that reality of faith can make a big difference in someone's recovery. Yeah, life.
It does. And you highlight a point too, and that is that just because you turn yourself over to Christ, just because you turn yourself over to a program of recovery and you're getting well, it doesn't mean that everything in your life is going to go well. Life is life. The difference is we are now in that stream of life, whereas when we're drinking and drugging, we've checked out. We're of no use to anyone. We're not of use to ourselves, but certainly to other people. And bad things happen. Yeah, just like this man. I think a lot of times people think that because I've taken this turn in life, then I will have no problems, and that's unrealistic. That's not the world. That's not. We are just going to be better equipped to deal with those problems because that man, had he crawled back into a bottle, he would have been. First of all, it would have created more depression. He was already depressed, obviously, but folks, alcohol. It sounds like it was alcohol.
Alcohol.
It was alcohol. Yeah. Is a depressant. Alcohol. So you're pouring a depressant on top of your depression, hoping to no longer be depressed. It doesn't work that way, and it makes it worse. And we are just not equipped to deal with life's problems when we are using.
Yeah. It's an escape, and you nailed it. And I think that there's an emotional or spiritual skill called distress tolerance. That not that all of us tolerate everything all the time. Not we're not Superman, Superwoman, Iron Man, whatever. But we can develop skills that allow us to face our problems. Mm-hmm. And if a problem is huge, that's what number one community is for, because we're not built to live alone. We're built to live in community with other people, to be connected, family, friends, people who are supportive. And sometimes our families are crap. Sometimes they are.
Sometimes they're the problem.
And so we have to, right? And so we have to find our families of choice, or those that do support us in another context. And that can be a faith community or some other type of community, AA or any number of programs that can be helpful. And so that, it makes a huge difference with those tools of distress tolerance. And then breaking down any problem. Maybe you're facing a problem today that you don't know how you're going to handle it. Let's sit with somebody who can help you think through it and get in your right mind, get out of your emotional mind and get into your rational mind and break down those problems that somebody can walk with you, so you don't have to be alone in your problems. Mm-hmm. And instead of drinking, escaping, forgetting, and walking off. Because
it's amazing whenever you sit and you talk to someone about your issues, particularly someone that's not emotionally connected to you, i.e. a spouse, son, daughter, somebody that has an emotional connection to you, because that oftentimes can be you can get the worst advice from those people, because there's going to be baggage. Oh, here we go again. Oh, Ray's, here we go. This happens all the time to Ray. We want somebody that can sit back and give you that objective opinion. And when you're in a community group, and particularly if you're talking to multiple people, and here's a rule of thumb in life, and that is, if multiple people in your life who care about you are telling you the same thing, maybe you should listen to that person. The classic example is, let's say you get a new girlfriend, and all of your friends are saying,
hopefully
Ray,
not. I've been married happily for over 30 years, so...
And me too. But let's say, you're in the market. Let's say you're a kid, right? I could do this with my own kids, right? Sure. And it's happened, all of us that have kids that are of that age where they start, dating and things like that. And I've run into this with both of my kids, where it, I don't know about this one. And what do your friends say? Oh, it's funny. My friends are telling me the same thing. Well, then you know what? If your parents and all your friends are telling you the same thing, there might be something there.
Something there.
But it's true in these community groups, too, that when we have an issue, that's why we go and we talk to people. And if you're getting advice or you're getting guidance from the people around you who care about you, and they're all saying the same thing, then maybe it's worth listening to. But it's important to get that advice.
And it's important to get that advice from people who actually know something about what you're going through. Because in the Navy we call them sea lawyers, right? And it could be somebody that your same status, your same rank, and they really don't know any more than you do. So it's good to talk to somebody senior. It's good to find a mentor. It's good to find like an AA sponsor, that somebody that you can put your trust in and really follow that person's lead, because they know more than you. They've been there, done that, got the T-shirt.
They've experienced it.
And lived it out. So important to not just get advice from random people that have no interest in you, but people who love you, yes, and people who are invested in your success, and people who know more than you do about whatever you're trying to learn about.
See, and this is important, particularly, we're in January of 2023 at the recording of this episode that we're doing today. So we're kind of getting out of the whole COVID lockdown process. And I will tell you that I think that the concept that you're talking about is probably, in the recovery world, probably one of the biggest downfalls of this period, is because churches and meetings to a large extent were shut down.
Yes.
Of course, I know people are going to say, well, then we went to Zoom, and that's a good thing. There are some good attributes to Zoom and all these types of meetings, but the one downfall is exactly what you're talking about, and that is that community. Because I don't care how diligent you are in going to Zoom meetings, there's no way you're getting that personal connection that you're talking about. Because being at an AA meeting or NA meeting is one thing on Zoom. Okay, yes, you're learning, you're hearing, but it's that connection, the mentorship, the meeting with the sponsor, face-to-face, being with another human being that can talk to you about the issues that you're going through and giving you that advice. And then the community from the room, maybe not just your sponsor, but other people in the room giving you input regarding whatever you're going through. We've lost that. And there are many people, even in the workplace, many corporations now have not fully gone back to people being in the office, and they think, okay, it's cost savings and there's all these other positive attributes. I get that, but we are really hurt, I think, emotionally and spiritually by this lack of connection. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, we started where I fellowship at church, we started our men's group back up about 6 months ago, and it is so good to get back together and sit with these guys who I've known for a couple of years, face to face. And I'm pretty far along in life and my career and everything, but there's guys in that group who are 20 years beyond me, and they're already fully retired, and they do certain things and are at a certain stage in their life, and they're worried about their great grandkids and all that stuff. And then there are young men there also that are just starting off that I can help out. So that it's this progression of learn and then turn around and then teach. And I think that's so important, that flow of not just information, but of life and of relationship and of health. And I think that's so helpful to both the receivers and the ones giving. Mm-hmm,
mm-hmm. And so you have to really go out of your way, particularly these days with what's happened with the world, particularly here in the United States, really get out of yourself and get back to connecting with people.
And it has to be intentional. Yeah. You have to go out of your way, like you said, and be intentional. Just like our physical, we have to be intentional about what we eat or things that we don't eat, or the exercise that we get, and the types of exercise, and depending on where you are in your physical health and your age, and meeting with your doctor. But we have to be intentional about these things in order to make progress. And one of those is to be honest with ourselves and invite other people to be honest with us about where are we with our program. Mm-hmm. Where are we with our in our life, and where are we with our? I have somebody who helps me overwatch my finances, and she's got a long range vision of where we need to be, and it's something that my wife and I have latched onto. And yes, we agree with these goals. You've got to have goals, and then you got to have steps to get there. Yeah. And I think, as far as recovery goes, or spiritual development in the larger context of that, it's a great tool.
That's a very good point. I mean, we think about it. Not only in recovery do we question the plan by the professionals that have been put out in front of us. We're not perfect at anything, but you pointed out you have a financial advisor, and they'll want you to do certain things. Your doctor, I want you to do this. I want you to change your diet. I want you to increase your exercise, and you can choose to do that or not. But most of us will at least make an attempt to do that. But in recovery, not uncommon for us to give a plan, which we developed with the patient, by the way.
Absolutely.
And then what happens? When they show up a week later, what happened? Well, I didn't do did you do the things that we talked about? No, I didn't do it. There's something about recovery. There's this stubbornness about that people have when it comes to recovery, that they somehow know better. And I think that's maybe get you to elaborate on this, particularly in your pastoral work, because you probably see it in areas beyond addiction. And that is this idea that I hear this all the time from patients. Well, let me tell you, Mike, what I prefer to do. Let me tell you what my plan. Let me tell you what I've always done. And of course, the way I look at it is, but what you've always done keeps bringing you back here. What is it, Ray, that you think that
or that you end up in the gutter in your own vomit, right? I mean,
like we were talking about before we came on here, that we find the patient.
No names.
Well, it's a lot of people, and maybe I was in that situation where on Friday we find you in a ditch in your own vomit and urine, and by Monday morning I'm lecturing you on how I do things and questioning God, questioning the science, questioning all these different things, and then
when your methods haven't worked at all.
No, my methods. Well, you did find me on Friday night in the ditch, and so here I am wondering why this isn't working for me.
Very
What is
sad.
it about people that, how do we tap into that? How do we get people to realize, hey, you might want to listen
I think
for a
there's
while?
two things. First of all, drugs and alcohol, which alcohol is a drug anyway, and we can talk about spirits and spiritual influence as well, because that's what we talk about. Alcohol is a spirit.
It's called that.
Wine and
you
spirits.
go by the store and it will say wine and spirits.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and those are very harmful things. Those are not effective behaviors, just to put it mildly. So I think people's judgment the patterns in their brains. I'm not a neurologist, I'm not a doctor, my disclaimer. But the patterns in their brains and their thinking get out of whack, and they're not able to see themselves for who they really are. And the second thing is just the human pride of nobody's going to tell me what to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we see a lot of that.
And physicians, I know, even if it's diet, exercise, those kinds of simple things, I hear doctors talk, well, I told her what to do. I told him what to do to lose X number of pounds or to get healthy or to get off these certain kinds of medications, but they'll never do it. And it's those kinds of prideful, kinds of stubborn things. And people will drink themselves and eat themselves into an early grave, and understand that they're doing it and leave their loved ones in the lurch because they're at the center of themselves. And they like that. They've gotten used to that.
And they feel that they are the experts in themselves. Now, and let me caveat that with, when I talk to people, because it's a fine balance, particularly when we're talking about recovery. Recovery is, we talked about this before, right? The people that tend to relapse do certain things. The people that get well tend to do certain things. But it's like within a sphere. Everybody's recovery program is the same and it's different all at one time. And I think that part of that journey is figuring out how you think. My particular recovery program would probably look different than your recovery program, but there would be certain things that the both of us do, which starts with not picking up a drink, not picking up a drug. But in those ways, I come from a military police background, you come from a military background. And so what I found in my early recovery that worked for me, putting in that structure, like, in my drinking, at the height of my drinking days, I had been a very, very disciplined person, military person, had been a pilot, all those kinds of things. But as I started to drink, all those things started to slip away. And whereas my life was really just not manageable, my life had become a bit unrecognizable from what it had been. Okay, but I knew how it had been. And I knew that back in my structured days, militant or military days, if you want to look at it, that I had gained a modicum of success in living my life that way, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, those types of things. And so this run in recovery, I decided early on that that's what I was going to do. And I used the term, I remember telling my wife, I'm going to go militant with my recovery. I was going to become very, very structured, went to work, worked out, went to meetings, sometimes 3 meetings a day. I was going to read that first year. I only read recovery literature. If I read something, it was recovery related or spirituality related. Yeah. But that was it. Nothing else. The holidays, didn't have anybody over. We didn't go to their place. It was just me and my family. Ironically, probably the best holiday season we'd ever had because there was no drama. It was just us. My kids even commented recently about how those were some of the best Christmases that we had, particularly that first one. But that's what I had to do. And as I told you before we came on this program, I picked a sponsor that was really old school AA, and he was and not so nice about it. If I did something stupid or wrong, he was not so nice in how he pointed that out to me. But that worked for me. Yeah. But that was the plan. And I stuck with that plan. And shockingly, here I am over a decade later, not having had a drink.
And you're still working it.
Still working it.
We never stop working it.
Right.
It's always, and that's the beautiful part of recovery is there's no end to getting healthier.
Right.
Right. I mean, we get older, but
which makes it hard. Which means that we should be even more disciplined.
Absolutely.
Right. Not less.
Correct.
And that's one of the things about recovery, and I like it, and I'll get you to elaborate on this, is one of the things that the people that have been in recovery for a while, and I said that they tend to do certain things. One of those things that they tend to do, and I actually don't know of any exceptions to this, is they work their program of recovery 30 years just as hard as they did in the first year. They don't let up on that. Whenever you hear somebody say, I'm a recovered alcoholic, or I'm a recovered drug addict, I call that out. You are not recovered. You are recovering. You're a recovering alcoholic, but you're not recovered because that ED is past tense. Right. There's no past, it is present tense. You're working it, and I have to work my program. My program looks different today than it did the first year, but it is still a program, and I still stick to it. Yes. And I think that that's what it is that like you talked about, finding that program and sticking with that program. But whatever that program is, you need to do it.
Yeah, you got to do what works. Right. Your approach is more militant. Others that I've worked with, a little more, not flexibility in terms of not picking up a drink or not picking up a drug, but more focused on spiritual growth and delving into religious literature, accountability in terms of that. Celebrate Recovery is one of those other programs that is faith-based that works for a lot of people. And what I wanted to get into a little bit was we have a lot of people probably listening who would consider themselves spiritual beings, but not particularly religious. And if I were to draw a Venn diagram of two circles, there would be an overlap part there of spirituality and religion and religious practices. And I think what I found in working with addicts to some extent, and you have more experience than I do with that, but is that religious practices can be very helpful. Prayers, historic kinds of things that have worked to help people develop their spirituality and their spiritual strength, and their groundedness and their rootedness in the eternal for thousands of years through various faith traditions. And so why throw out what works, right? And I would say religious practices devoid of that meaningful, benevolent kind of understanding of your higher power can be controlling, can become a compulsion in and of itself. And I'm not saying it is, but some people switch, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing to do it, but some people leave the bottle, pick up the Bible, and compulsively just use the Bible for that replacement. And I'm not saying that that's not a bad thing. I think it's a good thing. There's a lot of good things about that. Am I making sense here?
Yeah.
As far as the compulsion of the religious practices. And at the same time, if we develop that spirituality through those religious practices, and that spirituality becomes alive and vital, and the relationship with the divine becomes real to us, I think that is a positive driving force, not just in society and all through humanity and history, but also in our personal lives, so that faith becomes real and vibrant and wonderful in people's lives. And I think that's what the good spirit, right, the Holy Spirit, would have us do.
Because we are inward, but we're also outward facing. Yeah. Whereas with addiction, we're only inward facing. And like when you talk about those compulsions, it is not uncommon for people that come into recovery take that compulsion and then move into another compulsion. And I've had patients ask me, they say, well, Mike, I've noticed that people in recovery drink a lot of coffee. I mean, aren't you worried about that? That's going to be a problem. Or I've noticed that my smoking has taken up, or my eating has taken, or exercise. That's another one. A lot of people, when you look at the ultra endurance athletics, Ironman triathlon, ultra marathoning or marathoning, not uncommon to find a lot of people in recovery. There's actually a number of professional triathletes that are people in recovery, which is a great thing. So patients have asked me, well, but isn't that a problem? And I want people to think about this, that it maybe not. Here's sort of the litmus test to that. If whatever you are doing becomes a problem in your primary relationships, that being work and family, if it is becoming a problem for them, then by definition, it's a problem for you. Now, I will say that when it comes to coffee, I've never met anyone that had a boss come to them and say, you know something, Ray, notice you had 3 cups of coffee this morning. If you pick up a 4th one, I'm going to have to let you go, Ray. I've never heard that conversation.
No.
Or,
but I do know people who have made trips to the ER because they've drank too much coffee and it affected their physical system.
Yeah. And that would be another issue.
Emergency room.
Yeah. Now, if you get to that point where I had a guy,
that's a problem.
I actually had a guy. and you're right.
Yeah.
We can,
but I don't think anybody's going to the ER because they read, Holy Scriptures or
no.
books
And that can happen, but that's going to be a lot of coffee if you're drinking that.
True.
But it's, in other words, it's in early recovery. It's funny because they will come out of a 28-day treatment center, and then all of a sudden their issue is, hey, I'm worried about drinking too much coffee. Well, let's deal with that when we get down the road. I had a guy one time say to me, he goes, now we're talking about a guy that was obese. I mean, clinically, obese, no exercise at all. And he says to me, he and I were talking about the advantages to diet and exercise. And again, like a lot of addicts, it is. But Mike, I know that can become a problem. I mean, if I get to the point to where, I'm working out so much, my wife might leave me. And I remember saying to the guy, your wife's problem is you're drinking right now. And I'm kind of looking at you and I'm thinking that we might be at a little while off before. I mean, you're not exactly.
Might be about 100 pounds away from all that, right?
I tell you what, when you get to the point to where you're running 3 hours a day and you're spending half the day riding your bike and you're doing so many Ironman triathlons per year that your wife has left you, let's talk about it. I don't think that that's an immediate issue right now.
Yeah.
I don't think that's.
And I really appreciate what you said about the litmus test of is it affecting your immediate relationships? Are people coming to you who love you and saying, hey, you're doing too much of that, or why don't you do this?
If you get to the point, like you've been drinking and drugging the way problematically to the point where you need to go to a treatment center, and then later because don't get me wrong, there are patients that were very physically fit going into treatment. When I went into treatment, I was probably in that category. And then you get out.
Of course you were.
Of course. Just look at me, right? When you get out, and it gets to the point to where your wife says, Johnny's got a soccer game on Friday night. Well, I can't because my training plan says I got to do my 16-mile run. And okay, well, Johnny's got soccer tomorrow. Well, I can't because that's my, I got a bike for 3 hours. And well, what about Sunday? Well, that's my pool. So, and if you get to the point to where you're missing out on all of those life events because of some other obsession that you've picked up, then we want to have a discussion about that, because we didn't stop drinking and drugging to turn around and be just as absent doing something else. Because I remember talking to one particular patient, and I said, are you a professional athlete? I mean, are there sponsors that are paying you? Is your living dependent upon you doing these bike rides and runs? And of course, the answer to that was no. This is a middle-aged guy, just kind of doing it. I'm like, so you're missing out. Your wife is upset, and your kids are missing out because you've picked up a new obsession and a new hobby, but nobody's paying you to do this.
Yeah.
Right? You're not in the, I understand you're gone half the year because you're in the Navy or on deployment, but that's not what's going on here. Now your wife is looking at this. You are choosing to go do a 40-mile bike ride as opposed to going to the soccer game. That's different, and we need to have a discussion about that. But again, the litmus test. How is it affecting your primary relationships? Now, if you're single and you don't have kids, or maybe the kids are out of the house, and your thing is you want to go out and train 3 or 4 or 5 hours a day, and it's literally not affecting anyone else or your job, then knock yourself out. Mm-hmm. But that's something that you need to decide, and do that with the people around you. Is this something I'd like to do this, but how is it affecting those around me?
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's so true. And I think the benefit of religious practice and the development of spirituality, like I said, when we first started, when somebody starts into their addiction, all the other development stops. It's like all the bandwidth, all the energy of your development, your moral development, your moral compass, your spirituality, everything. I mean, you'll steal from your grandmother, right? not you, but addicts will steal.
Oh, yeah,
they will lie incessantly. They lie so much they don't even know they're lying. And to change all those practices without assistance, without support of a community, without a sense of development and spirituality, and without their heart changing, I can't imagine doing it. And
it's
being
a
successful.
Fundamental change. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It is.
And that gets back to that radical root of changing that time, speed, distance course that people get on. We've got to adjust.
When you meet people in long-term recovery, and I'll do this with guys I'm sponsoring that are new, and I'll have them look around the room. Mm-hmm. And I'll ask them, we'll do an exercise. I'll say, I want you to tell me who's new and who's been sober for a while. And without even getting into the difference between not drinking and being sober, those are two different things. And oftentimes, people will tell me, they'll pick out the people, and they'll be pretty accurate about it. But I'll ask them, why is that? Why is it that you say so-and-so has been sober for a while and so-and-so's not? Why do you say that? And they'll say, there's just something about Ray or whoever. There's just something about them. And what they're pointing out is they recognize that there is there's that inner transformation that took place. Mm-hmm. It is an inner transformation that has taken place with somebody in recovery. It's a spiritual transformation. It's an awakening. It's being aware of that next level, that fourth, actually the big book actually talks about the fourth dimension that you didn't even know existed, but somehow you tapped into it. That's what we're talking about. And you know it. You can't maybe articulate it, but you know it when you see it.
Yeah.
You know it when you see it. Mm-hmm. And even the new people in recovery can see it in others.
Yeah. Now addicts and abuse victims, others too, but those two categories have an uncanny sense of how to tell about people, because they've developed it to survive. It's a survival mode of they need to know when someone's going to go home or come home, walk through the door, and kick them across the room. Mm-hmm. They need to have that immediate sense of self-preservation. Mm-hmm. And where was I going with that? Where I was going with it was it's an innate people sense, and spirituality, I think, is a big part of that. And that could be what they're sensing in the room from other people, because I think we give off.
We do.
In our hearts and our minds, and how we connect with people, how we love ourselves, truly love ourselves, and how we love the world around us. And what? One of my favorite scriptures, Christian scriptures, is love your neighbor as you love yourself. And that is, love God, love other people, love God, love your neighbor, and love yourself as we love ourselves. And in that loving ourselves is we love our neighbors in the same quality or in the same quantity, in the same intensity as we love ourselves. So self-love is not evil in and of itself, but it has a quality of expansion to the community that we're part of, as we care about people who love us. And Jesus says, love your enemies. So it expands even to those who may want to do us harm. Doesn't mean we're best buddies with them or hang out or whatever, but the sense of loving ourselves, loving others, and then loving God goes in that order. Because
people coming into recovery often there is a self-loathing at that point.
There is.
And it's really hard when you are loathing yourself to help other. It's really almost impossible for you to love anyone else if it doesn't start here.
Yeah.
If it doesn't start here, then
the guilt, the shame, and it's so painful. That's why people climb back in the bottle again, because they feel they can't succeed, and they just give up, and it's just easier to crack open the next brew or whatever.
To check out.
Yeah.
Because it's escape. That's what it is.
Sure.
You don't want to be here, so you want to escape to get somewhere else.
Yeah.
And ultimately, that's that. So great conversation. So what's sort of in store for you, and maybe a final message to the listeners? What's the sort of like that key takeaway that you'd like for people to have from here on out?
I think a key takeaway for me that I invite your listeners to consider is the sense of faith, the sense of spiritual growth and spiritual ability to connect with yourself and to connect with the divine can be a definitely helpful part of your recovery process. And recovery is possible. And we can't do it alone. Yes, we need others. We need sponsors. We need whatever program works for you. And to be honest with yourself, realizing that the shame, the guilt, all those things that we can soak ourselves in when we're acting out, when we're misbehaving, if you would, really is a sense of God calling us back, of, I love you. I can help you through this. Be real, be authentic with me, because God knows all anyway. And so there's nothing that can be hidden. And like you shared your little story of being overseas, you know, all of us have been in situations where we could choose to do not good things, not helpful things. And yet we choose correctly. Now, sometimes we don't choose correctly, and God knows that too. But God is merciful and kind and always calls us back to God's self. And I think that's always so important. So if we grew up in a hyper-religious home where there was a lot of guilt and shame and condemnation for bad behavior, don't throw out the baby with the bathwater just yet. Look at the structure that was there. Engage the good parts that are helpful, that are hopeful, that really grow your spirituality. And then take that next step. Talk to somebody, connect on that, and have that discussion with people who love you and who you love, as maybe I'm going to take that next step of faith.
Yeah. And what's the next steps for you? You retired from the Navy.
Yeah.
You're still retired, kind of in the process.
I retired 13 days ago, actually. January 1st was my first day of retirement. So Happy New Year to me. So we're still figuring out all this stuff out. I'm connected to the International Church of the Foursquare Gospel, or Foursquare Churches, which is a group of about 2,000 churches here throughout the United States. I'm going to be, looks like the assistant endorsing agent, which is a technical term to say those people who want to become chaplains in the military or the Veterans Administration can come through Foursquare Chaplains International and be certified as a chaplain. There's all kinds of qualifications to that. So I'm helping out with that process of taking people who are Foursquare pastors and looking at their possibility of becoming a chaplain and serving the larger community in that sense. There's also a corporate chaplain group that I'm looking at becoming part of, and then working in healthcare chaplaincy, which after working at Portsmouth Naval Medical Center, helping out with the VA Medical Center, coming up here to Walter Reed, and we didn't even discuss the Wounded Warrior experience at Walter Reed. I will tell you that the most humbling experience of my life is being at the receiving area of Walter Reed National Military Medical Center in Bethesda, Maryland, and meeting the parents, meeting the next of kin, talking through them about what they're going to see. And then at 11, 12 midnight, whenever we called it the bus, whenever the bus ambulance would come from their loved ones overseas, and they would see their parents for the first time or their spouse for the first time, it never ceased to bring tears to my eyes. And I can just picture moms and dads rushing up to the bedside of their loved ones coming off that, and they may be missing an arm, missing leg, missing multiple limbs, definitely packed in with ice, definitely packed in with those life-saving machines around them that are helping them at that point to breathe. But they're actually coming off the medevac flights, putting on the buses, and being transported from their landing site into Walter Reed for that initial assessment. You can't keep those parents away. You just connect them, love them. It was such a humbling experience. Our Navy medicine, Army medicine do a fantastic job. Performed, I would say, miracles with so many of them. Not everybody turns out well, but so much.
That's got to be tough on you.
It was really such an honor.
Yeah.
If I think it was tough on me, it was especially tough on the parents and the wounded. And yet, talk about community and recovery, so much beautiful connection happens as the family comes together around that wounded warrior as the wounded warrior takes center stage, and rightly so, absorbs a lot of attention and a lot of care from the nation, from the hospital that they're in, and some of them go directly to Brooke Army Medical Center and the burn unit and things like that. I mean, I'm talking my experience is 10 years old now, so this is at the height of the war in Afghanistan and Iraq. So it's just a humbling experience. I'll never forget that.
Wow.
It's really cool.
That's good. And I'll tell you what, we'll have to do another program where we kind of delve into that a bit more. But thank you for your service. I was, just so everybody knows, I was at Ray's retirement ceremony. Beautiful ceremony. It'd been a while. I've not been to a military retirement in quite a while, particularly a Navy one, and it was good to see. I had not experienced. I every time I see stuff like that, I miss the military. I really do. The military. If you think of my entire career, the military was probably the smallest part of my career, even though I was in for 8 years. But it was probably the most impactful part of my career. And there's just something about the military, the community, you just don't get. Even in the police force and in the FBI where I was, it's just not as tight. It just isn't. And it was great to see everybody there and hear about your career, hear other people talk about your career.
Well, yeah, I paid them well. Yeah, it was good. It was good. Well, I mean, what started off on my trajectory and my personal journey, my spiritual journey was, I was raised in a wonderful home. Went to church and all that, but it didn't become real to me until I really needed God when I was going through Marine Corps boot camp at Parris Island, South Carolina, back in the 80s. And it was tough. I'm sure it's still tough. And just the sense of God watching over me, protecting those I was working with, and then volunteering to help out with the chaplains. I got to see what they do. And in my ignorance, I asked, do you guys get paid for this? Because I saw them having just too much fun. And they're like, oh yeah, actually I'm a lieutenant in the Navy, and explained the career path, and the doors opened, and, did what I needed to do as far as my degrees and education and everything. But it was really, to your point, it was really those, first couple years as a young enlisted Marine, age 18, 19, 20, that really set my pathway to a military career.
Those are those small changes that have big effects down the road. Yeah.
Huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was good. It was good. The military was good to me.
Yeah.
So,
well, guys, I really appreciate it. Appreciate you taking the time to come out here and do this interview, and we've got to do it again. And I want to have your wife on, who's a counselor as well.
Oh, she's got great stories. No attribution, no names. In fact, she told me, again, I don't know who it is, but you have some listeners that are clients of hers.
I don't
know how many, but hello out there. But anyway.
I'm looking forward to doing that. And you're listening. Thank you so much for doing that. Appreciate your support. But it's really just us getting the message out, trying to help people to get well. So Ray Houk, thank you again for coming on the podcast. And guys, we will see you next time. This is Mike Van Meter with Ray Houk, and this is Recovery is Possible. And we are going to be seeing you guys soon. It's a new year, January, almost halfway through, but we got a lot of big episodes coming up, so look forward to talking with you soon. Bye-bye.